Alright, hello everyone, Simon here, and today we're not playing Diablo 3, we're talking about Diablo 3. So if you want to see me play Diablo 3, then wait until tomorrow, and I'll upload the video then. But I'm trying something a little bit different with this one. So we have a playthrough with live ratings. What does that mean? Let me just try to tell you what that means. So I'm gonna do well, I've already done it, but I'm gonna upload a full playthrough of Diablo 3. And as I play the game, I'm gonna rate the game. So I'm just gonna think about how entertained I am at various points in the game, and I'm gonna say a number out of 10 for how entertained I am. So as things happen in the game, I'll just continuously rate it as I play. And so then after I did that, I took the ratings along with the timestamps, and then I took that data and I analyzed it, and I'm going to present that data here. So basically, this is going to be my review for Diablo 3 with timestamped ratings to back up what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then as you watch the video of me playing through the game, it should make sense. So it'll be like, I'll be fighting a few monsters, and then after I fight them, I say, well, that was kind of okay. I'll get it a 6 out of 10. Or maybe I fight a boss, and it's a really good boss fight, and I say, that's a brilliant boss fight, 10 out of 10. And so, as I kind of do things, I keep putting a number on it, just to say how I'm feeling, right? Whether I'm feeling good about it or not. And here we are. So just some background information on the playthrough. First of all, I am very experienced with Diablo 3. I've played about 200 hours, actually over 200. I don't actually know how many hours I've played. But I'm playing a barbarian in this playthrough, and this is my 4th character. And all the other characters are level 70, so they're max level. So I've played through the game multiple times already. I like the game, so I do have an existing positive bias for the game, so I already like it, right? So keep that in mind. It's the first time I'm playing the Barbarian class, and I'm going to adjust the difficulty as I play to match what I think is fun. So if the game feels too difficult, I'll lower the difficulty. If the game feels too easy, I'll raise the difficulty. I'm going to play through the entire campaign, including Act 5. So if you know, Diablo 3 has an expansion, which is the Reaper of Souls, and that's the 5th act. So there's 4 acts in the original game, and then 1 act, Act 5, as the expansion. So I'm going to play through all 5 of them, and the total playtime turned out to be 31 hours 17 minutes. So I've played through it already, right? And this is my the results of my number crunching. So let's just start off with all the ratings. So this chart here so the blue dots are the ratings, right? And so on the horizontal axis at the bottom, you see the time in minutes. So that's the game time, from 0 to 1,800 something minutes. So, and then on the vertical axis is 0 to 10, which is the ratings, right? And so, you can see that at the beginning of the game, I give it like a 7, and then like a 4 or something. And so then you can see like the 10s and the 9s and the 8s. And so as I play the game, we have how many minutes we're into the game, and then a rating for that point in time. And so if you take all of the numbers together, you might notice that it goes up. So it goes up from the beginning, and then it goes down again at the very end. So you can see this a slight inverted U shape in the ratings. And the reason for that is that at the very beginning of the game, before you get any items and before you get any skills, it feels kind of ordinary, to be honest. You have to kind of accumulate enough gear and enough skills before the game really starts to open up and you really get to enjoy the full extent of the game. And then at the very end, weird things happen when you reach level 60, because anything level 60 or above is expansion content, and Act 5 is also expansion content. And that stuff feels less balanced than Act 1 to Act 4 and level 0 to 60. And so the gaming experience got a little bit weird at the end, and I needed to adjust the difficulty a bit more. But overall, if you look at the trend line, which is basically just a linear regression on all the numbers, it's a solid 7. It's basically a solid 7 the entire way through, so it's a decent game. It doesn't really improve or get worse over the course of the game. So the entire game is a fairly consistent experience, except maybe Act 3 and Act 4, which is a bit higher than Acts 1 and 2 and then Act 5. So we just kind of analyze that. There is a slight peak past the midpoint, so it kind of goes up and then down again. And as I said, the enjoyment increases throughout the 4 acts of the original game, and it kind of peaks at the end of the 4th act a little bit. And then in Act 5, it kind of decreases a little bit. Well, at least that's my experience of it. If we look at the ratings divided by categories, I might not do this for future games. I don't know if I do any of this for future games, but for this one, I divided them into categories, right? So there's the bosses, there's the combat, the general combat, bosses, general combat, treasure goblins. There's skills, so the skill, not my skill level, but the skills that your character gets in the game. And then there's the design, there's dialogue, which includes story. There's loot, and then there's merchant, which includes crafting. So if you don't know anything about Diablo 3, that might not make any sense. But so the basic outline is that the bosses get better as the game progresses, because as the game progresses, the bosses become more complex and more challenging. So early on, the bosses are kind of simple and they're not very interesting. But the major bosses near the end of the game just get better and better because it just gets more and more complex, right? The combat is a very consistent 7 the whole way through. The combat basically feels the same. It dips a little bit at the very end because the difficulty level was a bit problematic once I hit level 70. But that's kind of my fault for not changing the difficulty upwards sooner. But there's also a little bit of weirdness at the end with the gear and the skills and all that. You'll see it in more detail in the playthrough. Treasure goblins was basically just treasure goblins, if you don't know what they are, basically they're special monsters that if you kill them, they drop a lot of loot. But if you don't kill them quick enough, they can escape. And they're the only monsters that can escape from you in the game. And so basically, every time I kill one, I give it a 10. Every time one of them escape, I give it a 0. So the goblins is not really a serious. It's not that serious. Although, having said that, I do enjoy hunting goblins, and I do get quite angry when they get away. So maybe it is worth a 10 and a 0, depending on whether you catch them or not. But it's not, it's not that serious. But I do enjoy killing goblins. Skills. The thing with the game is that about halfway through the game, you find all the skills that you really like. So the game gives you a lot of skills, but you don't really use all of them. In fact, a lot of them you just don't use. Basically, you find the skills that you enjoy and you just stick with them. And you have maybe like 4 times or 5 times as many skills as you're ever going to use. So it's a bit weird that way in Diablo 3. I guess they're allowing for different play styles, but at the same time, some of the skills just feel bad. I don't know if it's just me, but some of them just feel bad. So what happens is that you find the skill you like, and then you just ignore the rest, or you just think the rest are crap. So the skills are really bad at the beginning because you haven't unlocked them yet, and then they get kind of weird after you find the ones you like. The rest just seems kind of bad. So it's a bit strange that way. Not sure how to analyze the skills. Design is not accurate because I only pointed out the design when I saw something really awesome. I didn't go through the entire game looking at the design every 5 minutes or anything. I only paid attention when it was really good. So most of the scores are high, but that's because I only pointed them out when they're good. So that's not really representative of the design of the game as a whole, but it does highlight points in the game where I thought the artwork was really clever or something like that. The dialogue is okay. It's not great. It's okay. There are moments of brilliance, but most of it is fairly ordinary, the dialogue. And that includes the lore, that includes everything every time you talk to someone. A lot of it is just kind of background stuff that's not all that important. I mean, it builds character a little bit, but like the story in Diablo games is not awesome. It's okay. It's decent, but it's not. It's decent. It's consistent, but it's not awesome. Loot gets better over time, mostly because as you get to level 70, as you get to higher levels, you find, or as you play at higher difficulties, you find more legendaries and some more useful loot. Early on, we had some loot problems, but basically it gets better. The higher the difficulty, the better your loot. So as we play the game, as we increase the difficulty, we found better loot. And conversely, merchant goes down slightly because the merchant here includes crafting, so you can buy things and you can craft things. But they're useful at the beginning, and I guess around the middle when you don't really have very good stuff. But as you turn up the difficulty and as you get to the late game, the balance of the game shifts away from crafting and towards finding legendaries. And so, but it doesn't really matter so much, in terms of rating the game and how good it is. But it was quite noticeable that near the end of the game, I just couldn't craft anything good anymore because the stuff I had was already the best you can get, kind of. And yeah, I just had to find legendaries. So as you get to level 70, it doesn't really work anymore, basically. I don't know if that means anything to anyone if you don't know Diablo 3, if you never played it before, but well, there you go, that's the numbers. So that's basically what I've said. The bosses improved with increasing complexity over the course of the game. The combat is fairly consistent, and the combat is the bulk of the game. Almost the whole game is just you killing monsters. Goblins, more of them escaped in the higher difficulties. Well, I mean, the thing about the difficulty curve in Diablo 3 is that as you gain skills and as you find items, you get more powerful faster than the enemies get stronger. So you kind of have to crank up the difficulty as you play, otherwise the game doesn't really keep up with you. But there's the attack, there's the damage output, and then there's the tanking, right? Because you're fighting monsters. So there's kind of two sides to it: how much damage you can deal, and then how much damage you can take. Sometimes you can take a lot of damage because you have the right stats, and you turn up the difficulty, but you find that you can't actually do enough damage to kill things fast. And so then it becomes kind of grindy. So there's a balance between damage out and damage in. And if you're damage in, if you're tanky, but you're not very good damage output, then the goblins will get away because you can't kill them fast enough. So in the middle of the game, we found ourselves in a situation where we found too many tanking items and not enough attacking items, and then a few goblins got away. But there's a kind of delicate balance there between between the different stats and the different aspects of the game. Anyway, I won't go into too much detail about that, but the goblin is actually a very interesting way to measure if you're strong enough for that difficulty level, because if they get away, it means you're not strong enough, basically. Skills, as I said, Diablo 3 offers many options that you won't use because you'll pick the ones you like and then ignore the rest. I guess that's good because you have the choice, but then it feels kind of weird because there's so many things that you just don't use. The design, as I said, I only pointed out the impressive stuff, so it's not representative of the game as a whole. Dialogue, mostly mediocre with moments of brilliance. The loot gets better at the end because we turn up the difficulty and we find more legendaries. And the merchants get worse at the end because you can't craft the very best things later on. So if we compare the highs, mids, and lows, basically the highs is 8 to 10 is high, 4 to 7 is mid, 0 to 3, these are the ratings, right? 0 to 3 is low. So if you look at the proportions between high, mids, and lows, you see that the vast majority of the game is either okay or awesome. And there's just a few moments of bad. So if you play the game, you're fairly consistently having a good time. Like, it's very rarely bad. So the game is just an overwhelmingly positive experience. Even if you're not having an amazing time, you're still having a decent time. This is a height distribution. This graph might be a little bit confusing to read at the start. So again, at the bottom, at the horizontal axis, there's the game time in minutes. So that's how far we are into the game. In the vertical axis, that's the minutes since the last high. Remember, high is 8, 9, and 10 ratings. So the dot, see that one dot at around 400 game time, where it's up to 59 there. So that means that at the 400th minute of the game, that high, the time since the last time we had a lot of fun, was about an hour ago, if that makes sense. So between the last one and that one, an hour passed. So that's kind of bad because a whole hour passed without anything amazing happening. So that's not really a good thing. But if you look at the distribution of these dots and you look at the linear regression there, the vast majority of these dots are underneath 15 minutes, and the average is about 8. So anyway, let's go to here. So the average is 8.37. The standard deviation, interestingly, is also 8.37. So between 0 and 15 minutes, so 82% or 83% or so of the highs are less than 15 minutes apart, basically. Although there is the maximum of an hour, which is kind of bad. But as you play the game, you're fairly sure that at any point in time, you're fairly sure that within the next 15 minutes, something cool is going to happen. I mean, it's very reliable. You can say that, although not all the time. But you almost never have to wait more than 30 minutes between awesome stuff. So at any point in the game, you can fairly reliably say, okay, something awesome is going to happen between now and half an hour from now. And that's a good thing, because the opposite of that would be extended periods of boring. And you don't want extended periods of boring in any game, right? So the game is just consistently and repeatedly good. Some like good things happen, like interesting things happen, entertaining things happen at a fairly constant rate, except for that one 59-minute gap, which that wasn't very good. And then if we combine the highs and mids, then we see that the distribution isn't even tighter. So we're counting the really good bits and the average bits, and we can see that the vast majority of them are within 5 minutes, and none of them are more than 16 minutes apart. So you're never ever bored. Well, from my experience, in my playthrough, I was never bored for more than 16 minutes at a time. And most of the time, we're just constantly having fun because they're like 2 or 3 minutes apart. So the numbers there, the average there is like 3.87 minutes between highs and mids, and the maximum is 16. And so there's just no long periods of nothing good happening. So as you play the game, I never experienced boring for more than 60 minutes at most. And then in fact, that's probably not even accurate, because we don't rate everything all the time. So the game is basically just consistently entertaining. Even if something bad happens, something like you get a bad crafting, like you kind of waste a lot of money and didn't get anything good, or maybe you get ambushed or die, or even those are kind of good, or maybe someone says something stupid, or you get a new skill and you try it out and it's just not anything you like. Now, even if something happens that you don't like in this game, you very quickly move on to something else that is fun, and that's good. And it's not something that I can say for all other games that I've played. I have played some bad games in my life where you just spend hours. It feels like there's hours doing menial chores that are just boring. So this game does not have that at all. And so to summarize, playing Diablo 3 as a barbarian is a consistently entertaining experience. The least enjoyable parts, if we can even call them that, were the very beginning, before getting our first skills and before getting our first items. And then at the end, in Act 5, when we had to transition from the main game and the end game. Like the Diablo 3 has an end game. When you reach level 70, and after you finish the campaign, there's adventure mode, and then you can just kind of grind forever, looking for more legendaries, getting more powerful, doing rifts and everything. So there is a huge end game in Diablo 3 where you can just keep playing forever, and it's pretty fun. But it seems like the transition between the campaign and the end game is a little bit awkward. And so when we hit that in Act 5, and that was a little bit weird, but that's kind of okay. It's still not bad, but it's just like slightly less awesome than the rest of the game. And the most enjoyable parts were some of the major bosses and the goblins for me. And a few story points were also quite good. And we really have to reiterate that I did adjust the difficulty based on how much fun I was having. So there were a lot of things there's a lot of things in Diablo 3 you can do to make sure you have fun. First of all, you can adjust the difficulty. Like if you're being bored, you can turn the difficulty up. If you're dying a lot, you can turn the difficulty down. So you can change that, and that helps a lot. The thing with that is that the game doesn't actually do it for you. So you kind of have to do it yourself, which is okay, but it just means that the game doesn't always know how to balance itself, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't really know what difficulty it should be presenting you with all the time. You have to do it yourself. The other things is you can choose what skills you use, you can choose what equipment you use, and so as you play the game, there's a lot of things you can do to make sure you keep having fun. Because you just avoid the things you don't like, you just avoid the skills you don't like, you avoid the equipment you don't like, and so you just there's a lot of things you can do to make sure that you're still having fun. All right, I guess that's it. That's my review of Diablo 3. I know it's quite different from how everybody else reviews games. I'll see how this goes, and then I might think about how to adjust this process. But I like the concept of testing for fun. Like, how do you get data? How do you get hard data for how much fun people are having? And this is one way I'm thinking about. As you play the game, just give numbers from 1 to 10 on how much fun you're having, and then you timestamp it, and then you analyze it. And I think this might be interesting. I don't know who else does it. I guess some game development. Valve has to do this. Their games are so good. Valve games are so good. They must do something like this. I think Blizzard does too, probably. Anyway, I end this here. So the next video is where the gameplay actually begins, and then we go back to a fairly ordinary playthrough of a game. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next video.